Right now, somewhere in your chest, an alarm might be going off. You may not even notice it. It doesn't sound like a siren. It doesn't flash red. It just sits there, quiet and constant, telling you something is wrong. Most people call it loneliness, but that word is far too small for what it actually is. You felt it in a crowded room. You felt it scrolling through 100 messages that somehow still left you empty. You felt it at 2 in the morning, staring at a ceiling, wondering why a full life can still feel so hollow. That feeling has a name, but the name barely scratches the surface of what's actually happening inside you. This isn't an emotion your brain invented to make you sad. It's older than sadness, older than language, older, in fact, than almost anything else you feel. It evolved for one reason only: to keep you alive. Think about the last time you felt truly alone, not just quiet, not just by yourself for an afternoon, truly alone in a way that made your stomach tighten. That feeling wasn't random. It was a signal, and your ancestors depended on that signal more than they depended on almost any other instinct they had. Here is the strange part. Your body still runs that same signal today, even though the danger it was built for barely exists anymore. To understand why, you have to go back roughly 2 million years, long before cities, before agriculture, before anything you'd recognize as civilization. Early humans were small, slow, and physically unimpressive. No claws, no fangs, no armored skin. On the open savanna, a lone human was an easy meal. Survival didn't come from strength. It came from numbers. A group could watch for predators in every direction. A group could share food during a bad season. A group could carry an injured member for weeks until they healed. Alone, none of that was possible. Alone, you were prey. So evolution did what it always does. It built a warning system. Neuroscientist John Cacioppo spent decades studying this exact mechanism. He described loneliness as functioning almost identically to physical pain. Not metaphorically, literally. Cacioppo's research showed that social isolation activates some of the same neural pathways as bodily injury. Your brain, in other words, treats disconnection like a wound. Think about what that means. Hunger tells you your body needs food. Thirst tells you it needs water. Pain tells you tissue is being damaged. And loneliness, according to Cacioppo's work, tells you something just as urgent. It tells you your survival odds have dropped, because you have drifted from the group that was supposed to protect you. Cacioppo went further than just naming the feeling. He tracked its physical fingerprints: elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, a weakened immune response. In his research, chronically lonely people showed patterns of inflammation similar to people under sustained physical stress. Your body wasn't just reacting emotionally, it was reacting the way it would to an open wound, mobilizing resources, bracing for harm that hadn't even arrived yet. Why would evolution build something so costly? Because the cost of ignoring isolation was almost always higher. A body on high alert, even an uncomfortable one, was a body more likely to seek shelter, seek allies, seek the group again. Discomfort was the price of survival. This wasn't a bug in the system. It was the system working exactly as designed. A human who felt nothing when isolated wouldn't be cautious, wouldn't seek the group, wouldn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. The ones who felt the alarm, the ones who found the discomfort unbearable, went looking for others. And they lived. But how many people exactly could one person keep close? Anthropologist Robin Dunbar tried to answer that question by studying primate brain size relative to group size. Across species, he found a consistent pattern. The larger the neocortex, the larger the stable social group an animal could maintain. When Dunbar applied that formula to humans, he arrived at a now famous number: around 150. That's roughly the number of relationships a human brain can meaningfully track and maintain trust within. 150, not thousands, not the endless scroll of followers and contacts most people carry today. 150 faces, roughly, that your ancestors' brains were built to hold close, remember, and rely on. Dunbar didn't stop at the outer boundary. He mapped layers inside it, too. A tight circle of perhaps 5 people you would drop everything for. A wider circle of about 15 you'd call close friends. Then 50, then the full 150, each ring looser than the last, each still small enough to actually know. Beyond that circle, Dunbar argued, the brain simply runs out of the cognitive bandwidth required to track who owes who a favor, who can be trusted, who is kin, and who is not. Notice what that number tells you. Your brain isn't built for isolation, but it also isn't built for infinite connection either. It's built for a tribe, a specific, bounded, deeply known group of people who would notice if you disappeared. Now picture what happened when someone in that tribe wandered too far from the group. Maybe they were exploring. Maybe they got separated during a hunt. Maybe conflict pushed them out entirely. Whatever the reason, the moment of separation would have triggered something immediate. A tightening, a restlessness, an urgent, uncomfortable pull back toward camp. That pull is still inside you. Psychologist Harry Harlow's studies with rhesus monkeys, though conducted decades ago and now viewed through a more critical ethical lens, revealed something researchers couldn't ignore. Infant monkeys isolated from social contact didn't just become sad. They became fundamentally altered, anxious, withdrawn, unable to properly bond even when reintroduced to others later. Harlow's findings suggested that connection wasn't a luxury layered on top of survival. It was a biological requirement wired in as deeply as the need for food. Humans are no different, maybe more sensitive, if anything. So here's the question worth sitting with. If this alarm evolved to protect you from wandering too far from a small, tight, life or death tribe, what happens when you live in a world with almost no tribe at all? Public health researcher Julianne Holt-Lundstad led a massive analysis combining data from over 300,000 participants across dozens of studies. Her conclusion was stark. Chronic loneliness was associated with a significantly increased risk of early death, comparable to smoking several cigarettes a day. Not a mild inconvenience, a measurable physical threat. Think about how strange that finding really is. Smoking damages the body through chemistry, through tar and carbon monoxide entering the bloodstream with every breath. Loneliness damages the body through absence, through nothing happening at all. No cigarette, no toxin, just an empty chair where connection should have been, and a body responding as though that emptiness were a wound. Your ancestors' bodies weren't wrong to treat isolation as dangerous. Your body still isn't wrong either. The alarm is accurate. What's changed is everything around it. Think about a typical day now. You might speak to dozens of people online, comment threads, group chats, video calls with faces from 3 time zones away. And yet, somehow, you can end that day feeling emptier than someone who spent it in near total silence, surrounded by 3 people who actually knew them. Why? Because your alarm isn't measuring contact. It's measuring closeness. It's asking a very old question, one your ancestors' lives depended on. Would these people notice if I vanished? Would they come looking? Do they actually know me? 1,000 shallow connections can't answer that question the way a single deep one can. Your nervous system knows the difference, even when your calendar looks full. Consider how differently your ancestors experienced a day compared to you. They woke up beside people who had watched them grow. They ate beside people who had shared famine and feast with them for years. Every face around the fire carried history, obligation, memory. There was no ambiguity about belonging. You either sat at that fire or you didn't. Now compare that to a modern feed of faces you'll never meet in person, voices in a group chat that go quiet the moment you close the app, likes that arrive and vanish within seconds. None of it is fake, exactly. But almost none of it carries the weight your alarm system is actually searching for. Weight built from time, from shared hardship, from someone who would notice immediately if you went silent for 3 days straight. This is why loneliness can feel so disorienting in the modern world. The alarm is going off, exactly as designed, but you're standing in a landscape it was never built to interpret. No predators circling the camp, no physical tribe to walk back toward, just a phone in your hand, buzzing with notifications that feel like connection but rarely satisfy the actual need underneath them. And here's the twist most people never consider. That discomfort you feel isn't a personal failure. It isn't proof that something is wrong with you specifically. It's proof that your biology is still running software built for savanna tribes of 150, trying to make sense of a world of 8 billion strangers and a handful of true companions scattered across screens. The ache is not weakness, it's information. It's the same mechanism that once pulled a wandering ancestor back to the fire, back to the group, back to safety. So what do you do with an alarm like that? You could try to mute it the way many people do. More apps, more platforms, more ways to feel technically surrounded without ever feeling truly known. But muting an alarm built by 2 million years of evolution rarely works for long. It just gets louder, quieter, then louder again, cycling in the background of an otherwise busy life. You don't silence it. You listen to it the way your ancestors did. Not by adding more contacts, not by chasing more notifications, but by narrowing back toward what the system was actually built for. A few people who would notice your absence, a few faces that count as your tribe, because that ancient alarm was never asking you to be known by everyone. It was only ever asking you to be known by someone. Think back to that ancestor, separated from the group, feeling that first tug of unease as the distance grew. They didn't need the whole tribe waiting for them. They just needed to know someone would notice the empty spot by the fire. That single certainty was often enough to turn them back around, long before the danger ever became real. You are built from the descendants of people who listened to that pull. The ones who ignored it, who wandered too far and stayed too long alone, rarely made it back to pass anything on. Every alarm you feel today is inherited from someone who once turned around and walked home. And tonight, when you feel that familiar tightness, that quiet pull toward connection, remember what it actually is. Not a flaw, not sadness for no reason. It's the oldest alarm your species ever built, still working exactly as intended, still trying to walk you home.